I'm Arno Harthold. I head up the tech integration and art production groups here. One of the things we do is we shepherd the Virtual Human Toolkit. Welcome. If you're late, there's no chair, sorry. But feel free to sit wherever you want, that's totally fine. You can sit on those things. You can sit at the side, wherever you're comfortable. We're getting a few more chairs. So as you may know, we do a lot of work with virtual humans here at IVH. A lot of different research groups, natural language and dialogue, nonverbal behavior, emotion, a lot of different groups, and we all come together and we create a virtual human architecture, which forms the basis of a lot of our virtual human projects. The Virtual Human Toolkit is a collection or a subset of those things, and we make that available for the academic research community. It's online. What I will do is I will discuss virtual humans very briefly in general, then delve a little bit deeper into what the toolkit is, what's part of it, and then I'll give a demo of how you can get it, how you can run it, and any next steps. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me those, but at the end we'll have time for questions as well. Any questions so far? Excellent. Virtual humans, we want to create engaging characters that are autonomous, that can perceive us, that can convey communication, that can convey content back. We want to be able to model their beliefs, beliefs of others. We want them to exhibit certain feelings. I want to make sure that when we create these, they're efficient, they are coherent, and they are integrated. And that's one of the things that makes ICT unique, is that we look at a variety of different capabilities that make up virtual humans, and we integrate them in a common framework. Our goal then is to create those capabilities, or to use those capabilities to create characters that are engaging and that can be meaningful in social interactions with real human users. And you can then use them as tutors, you can use them as role players, as adversaries, you can use them for training, for the military, which we do a lot, for medical domains, whatever you can see them as digital role players, virtual role players that you give a certain task, a certain role to play. We're not the only ones who do this. We work with a variety of other institutes. You can see here a brief example of individual capabilities. We reuse speech recognition, for instance, text-to-speech, and a couple of other areas. We are basing our architecture on certain frameworks that are out there in the open. SAIBA is the most well-known of it. It dictates or prescribes how entities can be created from a conceptual point of view. But what makes ICT unique, as I said, is the integration of them. That's partly an engineering challenge. That's partly a research question. Which capabilities can we best integrate? Which are desired? Which is the minimum set that we need? How can they best affect each other? How can we leverage each other? When you create all these capabilities, you put them in a common framework. Now you can leverage the capabilities and come to something where the whole is more than the sum of its parts. So a lot of groups here at ICT that work together on this. We've created many virtual humans. I'll highlight a few later. But like I said, they range from military training systems to medical training systems to entertainment and a variety of different ones in between. Now this architecture then, from a high-level point of view, has these capabilities. So a human user is interacting with an agent, a digital character. That can happen through speech recognition, just like, say, Siri, natural language understanding, but also through audiovisual sensing. Now, the agent then creates a communicative intent, something it wants to convey back to the human user. And that can happen verbally and non-verbally. So all of these different capabilities together form a generic virtual human. But for a specific system, you can now look at specific architectures, technologies that instantiate these different capabilities. So here we have a system. This was in the Boston Museum of Science. It's a question answering system. A visitor could walk up to the museum guides, virtual museum guides, ask a question, and the characters would respond back to you. That doesn't use any audiovisual sensing, and it uses a speech recognizer, AutoSense in this case, and it uses the Npc Editor, a statistical text classifier, to select one of pre-authored answers that a character can give. So the toolkit is basically based on this concept, where the Npc Editor forms the core of the natural language interaction. It's a statistical text classifier. It's very close to information retrieval. You would ask a question on Google, you get a list of returns back. That's what this system is like. But we add to that speech recognition. We add to that the ability to have nonverbal behavior, to use pre-recorded speech or text-to-speech, and ultimately we combine it in a game engine. That used to be Gamebryo. Right now it is Unity. Now, a different type of system is Rapport. That's a more research system. And here we asked ourselves, when two people talk to each other, and one is talking and one is listening, can we model the behavior of the listening agent to provide appropriate back-channeling behavior? So if it's one-on-one, somebody would just nod their head once in a while. You say, yeah, that kind of stuff. So we model that. We don't have speech recognition here. We have a vision system and a set of rules that create this behavior for the virtual character based on what the real human user is doing. Now, we still use our same animation system called SmartBody, again integrated in a game engine called Unity, but now different capabilities, different kind of system, still using that same framework. Now, lastly then, Sensei, you may be familiar with it, a virtual intake nurse. She is interviewing you, a human user, with the aim of getting you to talk, to look at your face, your body language, your voice, and see if we can find signs of depression. So how often are you smiling? How long are you smiling? What's the prosody of your voice? All those signs we're looking at while you are talking, being interviewed by this digital character. So now we do have speech recognition. We do have natural language understanding, and we combine that with audiovisual sensing. We have a different kind of natural language capability. It's Flores, the forward-looking, reward-seeking dialogue manager. Tie it to nonverbal behavior generation in the form of Cerebella. Still SmartBody, still Unity, still the same framework. So the message here is that the framework is the same. The APIs between the different modules are the same. But for each capability, you can choose certain actual technologies to instantiate that capability. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. Now, the toolkit then has a couple of main modules that we created here at ICT. For audiovisual sensing, we use Multisense, also used in SimSensei. The Npc Editor I mentioned, natural language, statistical text classifier. We generate nonverbal behavior on the fly with the Nonverbal Behavior Generator, NVBG. And we have a behavior realization, our animation system, which is called SmartBody. Now we add to that third-party software combined with some internal software. Acquire Speech is a speech recognition client developed here, but it can link to different speech recognition servers, including Pocket Swings, as a backup Google and others. For text-to-speech, we use third-party software, Microsoft SAPI, Festival, and a couple of others. Our main game engine is Unity. We provide Ogre externally for an example on how you can use an open source engine with this. Everything is based on messaging, so the different capabilities that you saw, the different boxes, most of them communicate by sending messages to each other. That's based on ActiveMQ. We add some authoring tools, debug tools, and supporting library, and that then forms the toolkit. We have one main example, Brad and Rachel. You can ask them questions, they will answer. And this goes a little bit more into the weeds, but I'll get back to this later, actually. We'll do this in the end. The main modules then. So Multisense is audiovisual sensing. It's a framework in itself. You can plug in different modules like a webcam, like a Kinect, different kind of sensing modules. And the idea is that it provides you with raw data. Then you can abstract from that raw data certain behaviors, like is a person smiling or not. And then the next level, which is more on the research side, is that smile. Is it like a devious smile? Is it a happy smile? Can we infer intent from the behavior that we're getting? So all of that is being provided by like I said, it's a different framework. So there's different providers of data, there's different transformers of data and consumers of data, all sending out this information in a standard called the perception markup layer. Like I said, sensing layer is at the lower level, behavior layer is inferring that from the lower level, and then the third level, more on the research side, is the intent layer. Npc Editor then, statistical text classifier, like I said, information retrieval, similar to Google. On the left-hand side, you see example questions. This is how you author a system. What can a user ask? On the right-hand side, you see the answers that somebody authored for this character. You link them together, so when somebody new is asking a certain question to the agent, this information retrieval process will pick out the best possible answer it can find and give that back to the user. The novel idea here is that if you provide it with example questions, but if a novel answer comes in, something it has never seen before, it is an algorithm that looks at similar questions to relevant answers, relevant words, both questions and answers, and this algorithm will then rank the possible answers that the system knows. Now on the NVBG side then, the goal is to generate nonverbal behavior on the fly. So if I'm talking to you, I use certain gestures, I look at certain people, I try to scan the room, I gaze, I walk around. All of that we can generate on the fly if we want to. What we focus on is conversational gestures. So when I talk to you, I use a you gesture. When I have an abstract notion, I make this kind of gesture that identifies an abstract idea. We have codified those things in a set of rules. And now the system can look at the surface text and the audio in real time and select the appropriate gestures that it has available for a certain character and schedule all of that in synchrony with the voice. It knows what a gesture looks like. It knows that when I say you, there's a stroke point. I'm sorry, I keep pointing at the same person, you. There's a stroke point that at the end of this motion, or the most emphasized portion of this motion, that needs to coincide with the word you. That's happening here. Now at the surface text at the bottom, as you can see, that it's some grammar rules, a lot of keyword spotting, and some syntax. We derive from that a certain function. So the fact that I'm addressing somebody or that I'm talking about me. That suggests then certain behaviors, like I just mentioned, and we realize those behaviors in our animation system. These are different steps where rules fire. A whole bunch of rules may be valid for a given line. There's some pruning to make sure that we don't get a whole bunch of stuff. And that then results in a behavior schedule that's sent to our animation system. There's a whole bunch of details here. An example, so the function of negation can come from certain words like no, not, nothing, cannot, and then you can tie certain behaviors to it, like a head shake or a no gesture or something like that. So we have all these different categories based on this. Okay, what the NVBG does is create a behavior schedule. It's a formal way of informing a character of what to do. Then you need a module that can realize this behavior schedule, and we use SmartBody for that. So the schedule is in a standard called the Behavior Markup Language. SmartBody, or BML. SmartBody is a BML realizer, so you can give it a high-level goal or schedule, and SmartBody can realize that. It has a hierarchy of controllers, so like a gaze controller and a gesture controller and a walking controller. You can see all the different things it can do. And it can take a high-level schedule and realize it, including constraints of what a human body can do. Like you can only turn so far, you cannot run as fast as a leopard and all those kind of things. It has those basic rules and restrictions in it, and it can realize the behavior as best as it can based on what it gets from the NVBG. So that's the high-level part of the Virtual Human Toolkit. Does it all make sense so far? Good. Then I will show you the toolkit. Internally, externally, there's a toolkit website. So if you're outside of ICT, if you want to learn about any documentation, there's tutorials on here, documentation about individual modules, things like that, start here. If you are not part of the ICT network, you can go to download, you can fill in this form, and you can download, you can request a toolkit, I will send you a download link. If you're inside of ICT, we have everything on NetApp. So on Windows, //NetApp/VH is the main thing. In VH, you can go to the Virtual Human Toolkit, and here you see a whole bunch of different types of installers. What's important is basically the one with the highest number, 0.9 point whatever, in this case 50. You can organize it by date. We have two different versions. They are functionally equivalent, but the small one only has binaries and a little bit less data. The regular one has everything. So when you download the regular version installer, it's a zip file. You will need to get the 3 files that are in here. There's 2 installers. The main one is the VH Toolkit full that will run the main installer. It will ask you to install third-party software. You will need admin for that. So if you're an intern, you will have to ask your supervisor. You need a third-party software if this is the first time you've run the computer on the Toolkit on your computer. After that, Toolkit should be installed in wherever you put it in. In this case, I put it right here. The main file here is run launcher. So when you launch that, it will provide you with a way to run the different modules in the Toolkit. To get started, the only thing you need to do is run this big arrow here. So the background, you can see it at the bottom, certain modules are being loaded right now. When it's all done, Unity comes up, which is our game engine, and that's how we can get started. So by default, Unity opens with a menu. There's a couple of things. You have different settings and whatnot, but I'll just start the main demo. It will load a level. It may take a while, especially on older computers. This is an older computer, by the way, just so you know. And the demo is Brad and Rachel who talk to you, and you can talk back to them.
Hi, I'm Rachel, a virtual human.
Hi, I'm Brad, a virtual human.
A virtual human is a character like us that can perceive real humans and respond both verbally and non-verbally.
We're here to help show off what the Virtual Human Toolkit can do.
Virtual humans have many applications, from education to research to entertainment.
You can ask us questions about ourselves or the Virtual Human Toolkit.
Okay, a couple of things that are important here. So this is a demo level. Brad and Rachel characters, question answering characters, so I can ask them a question and they will answer it. The 2 ways of doing that, you can either just speak to them with a microphone or you can type in the question. This laptop has a notoriously bad microphone, so whatever I say will not be picked up, just so you know. But I'm going to show you anyway how it works. You press the left mouse button like a walkie-talkie, you ask your question and you release it. So, what is your name?
The weather's great. Did you realize we're in your computer, right?
How's the weather? You're talking to a virtual human, and all you can think to ask about is how's the weather?
Yeah. So, I'm going to ask it one more time. This time, right here, you will see what the speech recognizer thinks I say, which also has nothing to do with the weather, but that aside. So you'll see what happens there. What is your name is what I was asking.
My full name's Rachel Catherine Taylor.
There you go. What is your name? The smile of the. So it's a good example of third-party speech recognition software that's open source. So that's already not great. My microphone isn't great, but it picked up some of the keywords this time. And you can see that the algorithm behind it is robust enough to, with that, pick up the right words and provide you with the right answer. And that's really the strength of the Npc Editor, is that you can fairly quickly create a robust interaction of these question answering characters. Now, there's a couple of keyboard shortcuts that you can use. There's the M for microphone. You will see that when I use that, the microphone button goes from right to grayed out. I now have my cursor, and I can ask here any questions like, how old are you?
Old enough to not have to tell.
What can you tell me about the toolkit?
The Virtual Human Toolkit is a collection of modules and tools designed to aid in the creation of virtual humans.
Brad, you are so formal. The modules and tools in the toolkit help you make me.
Okay, so again, basic ideas. You ask these questions to the characters respond with whatever you have authored in there. Npc Editor is robust enough to get to the best answer if you've given it enough example questions.
Good question.
Yeah.
In that case, was Rachel's response scripted, or did she know what Brad said and responded relative to Brad?
So it is scripted. And the idea to look at it is that whatever a character says doesn't need to be a single answer. It can be a string of answers, or it can be the two characters going back and forth. It just means you trigger something. That something earlier, like, you know, old enough not to have to tell you, is just a simple response. But here, indeed, you saw multiple characters, so that something that you're getting back is more elaborate. There's also a strength of the Npc Editor is that it's scriptable, and at a very high level, you can just look at it as an input and an output. The Npc Editor doesn't know what my question means. It doesn't know what the answer means. What it knows is statistics. So you can classify whatever you want to do. We happen to classify natural language because that's what we happen to do here. A couple of other things. The keyboard shortcuts are in the documentation in the FAQ, but I'll show you a few more. If you hit J, you can now move around. You can move the cameras. You can see that they keep following my gaze. So that's with the J key. If you're a gamer, you know the WASD makes you move around in first person. In this case, we added TFGH to make the Brad walk. So you can use that. Apparently you can only, there we go. With the C key, you start the debug menu. I won't go into that in detail. You can explore it yourself. You can load different scenes. You can debug SmartBody in certain ways. You can trigger certain animations, and this I will not go over. Okay, any questions so far? So let's go back to the launcher. If you expand this a little bit, there's an advanced button. And here it shows you all the different modules that are being loaded. So what this big green button at the top does is it runs everything that's checked. There's certain profiles in here. We're running the Unity profile that is set up and configured in such a way, you know, what is being checked, what are the parameters for everything, so that it all just works out of the box. You can create your own profiles if you do some development work and you want to just quickly do a certain configuration. Create your own profile, load your own profile, and use that. Now, when I run all of this, you can see that whatever is checked is green right now. That means there is a system behind it that constantly pings these modules and see if it's still online. If your row is orange, something is wrong. If your row is green, it's good. If it's just gray, then you never used it. So the first one is the renderer. So this harkens back to the architecture that I mentioned before, these different capabilities that can be instantiated by different technologies. So the renderer is Unity, and by default, it all works fine. Nonverbal Behavior Generator is based on Brad and Rachel. Npc Editor, you can choose what data file you want. The speech recognition server, in this case Pocket Swings, and a client, and a text-to-speech engine, which in the background can use different kinds of text-to-speech capabilities. So here you can load everything you want manually or not. There's certain tabs at the top here. The only relevant one is the perception one at the moment. Again, you can expand it, and we can add multisense to the mix. Multisense in this iteration is a little bit processor intensive. It's a lot of audio-visual processing. So it's a little bit slow on this computer because it's quite old, but it does work. You have multisense on one hand, and we have a small client application that you need to run as well. Now, what multisense does is it looks at the audio. Oh, it actually has stopped. Start it one more time.
How strong of a computer would be needed to run the toolkit?
So this is a laptop, and the laptop is 4 years old, and it runs fine. Like I said, once you get into multisense, it's a little bit slow. But here, I think this basic stuff runs at. If you hit the Z key, by the way, you can do some debugging. A lot of stuff is happening right now, but you get a frame rate counter. I think it runs at like 30 frames a second or so. Okay. You can see here there's some processing done on the audio itself. You can see here the raw input of the camera. And you can see here a box that's being painted on top of it. So it knows which direction I'm looking at, and it knows what my face is doing, so I can smile and do a whole bunch of stuff. This is all being sent out in the perception markup language, and I'll show you that in a little bit. So that means that any module that wants to pick it up can pick it up and do something with that data. So what we did with this very basic client thing is, it is a little bit slow here, but it's basically mirroring my head movement. A little bit more normal is I can look to the side, and the characters can follow my gaze, seeing what I'm looking at. So it's just a basic example of how you can use sensing data on one side and use it in a certain module. In this case, it's Smart Body. Maybe we can just tell Smart Body, gaze this way, gaze that way, things like that. Let me see. You can also do something else. So here, for instance, you can see that I've been talking to the system, and the attention is like somewhat medium, but if I don't do anything for a while, attention goes up. Yeah, oh yeah, that's why. Maybe I just need to look away. There we go, you're right, you're right. So I was paying a lot of attention to the window. Oh, interesting. Cool, yeah, anyway, so that's what you can do with it. It's amazing. I'm going to quit multisense now, so any questions about that? Okay, while we're at it then, I mentioned PML. The first ICT logo is the launcher, as I just mentioned. The second one is the logger. I think I flooded it, so I'll get back to that in a little bit. But all these are messages being sent. And the one slide that I skipped earlier, you can see here as well. So let's go back to the toolkit itself. Getting started just gives you a brief overview of where to get started documentation-wise. Tutorials has a couple of movies on the left-hand side and some textual tutorials on the right-hand side. But the meat of it is in documentation. So here you can look at the general architecture at any of the components, and we divide it up in modules. Those are the main runtime components like NVBG, Multisense, Unity, Smart Body. Tools, those are supporting components that you use either to debug or to author, and then libraries, which are supporting software elements. If we go to architecture, you see that same overview as I had, but a little bit more explained. It's the high-level overview of our architecture. And then the way we use it in the NVB, in the toolkit, which specific capabilities do we use? And here, a more detailed overview of how the capabilities communicate to each other. So, let me kill this. This big button kills everything, quits everything. I'll load it up again in a minute. So here you have the human user, again talking to an agent. We use multisense here. We're actually using, in this case, a certain shortcut. So there are PML messages going to our client, who's going to Unity and Smart Body. So that means also you can see here that from a software engineering point of view, you have some flexibility. You don't need to follow the exact lines of communication as prescribed by the architecture. You can have certain exceptions to it. It also means that when you get down into the weeds, our animation system can be directly integrated with a game engine. That's typically how things work. You have an animation system not as a separate module, but as a DLL that's integrated into the game engine. So that's the case here, Smart Body together with Unity. The main normal lines are all the messages. So when I speak, messages will be sent to the Npc Editor, who analyzes it, who sends a functional markup language to the NVBG, basically saying that, okay, this is the line I want to say it with this kind of mood and affection. NVBG generates a behavior markup language that it then sends to Smart Body. And there's some stuff going on in the background with parsing data. Every big, thick line is a direct connection. So our TTS, text-to-speech engine, can interface with a variety of different commercial entities. Those are, again, just DLLs that are happening right here. So what I can do is launch this one more time. This time I'm going to get rid of the renderer. I'm going to set the parameters so that I don't go into full screen. I don't hear an intro, and I will go directly to the campus. Now I can run this again. It will run everything here. Everything will slowly turn green. I can run the toolkit, which this time does not start full screen. And it should go straight to the campus scene that we saw before.
Hi, I'm Rachel, a virtual human.
Okay, apparently the thing doesn't work anymore. What I want to show, but which is not working right now, is all these logs. So you'll have to do that in your own machine. This may be too old after all. If you go to the documentation and I clicked on architecture, under architecture you have virtual human messaging. So when you look at all these different modules and how they send information, most of those are happening with messages over ActiveMQ. We have a library called VHMessage that you can use for C++, for Java, for C#, and a couple of other languages. So you can create your own module, use the VHMessage library in order to send and receive messages. So you can hook up your own module within this system. Just like we sort of hooked in this little thingy right here, listening to PML, sending out smart body commands, you can insert your own modules and you know, depending on your frame of reference, break the architecture or extend the architecture. Now, the messages are defined here in terms of how a message is being used. And some of them are being described right here. So a VR Express message, for instance, is the message that goes from the Nonverbal Behavior generator to smart body. It's a behavior markup language message. And you can see here what kind of XML is being sent. So for instance, this one is quite easy. It's basically just giving you a bunch of standard configurations, and then it's telling you to speak a certain language. Sorry. That was the wrong example. Well, this was in between the Npc Editor and the NVBG. So the Npc Editor selects a line, it sends that to the NVBG, who then parses it. So this first one was, I'm going to speak this line, and now the NVBG can create that BML language. And it basically says, okay, for all of these words, I have all of these tags, and on any of these tags, I can say, do a gesture here, have a head nod here, do a gaze here, that kind of stuff. So everything that's being sent through the system are these kind of messages. These are some standards, some are our own, but you can use VHMessage to create your own messages in this way. Okay, what I'm going to do now is show you how to author some of this content. But are there any questions so far? Okay. Now, what you need to do for authoring content is two things. I am going to quit everything except the renderer. So the individual lines you can just close off. I'm going to use a tool that we use to get people familiar with the concepts. You wouldn't necessarily use this tool to create a big system, but it's helpful to get started. So now you don't need the launcher anymore. What you need is the VH Builder on the one hand and Unity on the other. So in VH Builder, you create a new scenario. I'm going to call it scenario 2. Now in the background, it's loading the different modules that you would need and configuring them in the right way. So it's asking you to please wait while everything is loading in the background. And if you want, you can still look at the launcher and see what's up and running or not. So we're all done here. I can now, the characters are empty, so I can query the system. And in Unity, it knows which characters we have. And that means we now have Rachel and Brad as our characters. Now, there's a quick example already in here. Again, these are questions you provide as input to the system, and these are answers the character can give. So an answer here is what Rachel would say. You can double click this.
I am doing well.
So by default, it's using text-to-speech, and this is what Rachel can say. Now, conceptually, when you create these kind of systems, what you want to do is think about, okay, basically this character has a bunch of information in it. Again, think back to the Google thing. Google has your answer somewhere, right? It's up to the user to phrase your question in such a way that you get the answer you want. So think about the mindset of what the user would say when interacting with the system, and think about what knowledge your character has. And those are the answers. So for a simple thing like, basically her state of well-being or just a polite greeting, I am doing well is one example. What you want to do is avoid repetition. The moment a character says the exact same thing, it just doesn't look well. So you can add variations like I'm great, I am wonderful. So these again are examples of what the character will say.
I am wonderful. I'm great.
All of these are being generated on the fly, but they are being cached. So if you have longer sentences, the first time will take some time. The second time you use it, it will be a lot less long time. So again, these are what a character will say. Now, on the question side, you're provided with examples of basically how an actual user can interact with this character in order to get this answer. So how are you is a great example, but you want to offer other examples like how is it going, how are you? And here's where a lot of training and testing will go into the system. You can now select these example questions and the answers you want them to be tied to. And you can link these questions together. You can apply this so that in the background the system is training it. And now I can ask the system here, how are you?
I am doing well. I'm great.
Ask the same question and we'll get the same answer. Now again, the novel idea of the Npc Editor is that it's robust. So you don't need to give the exact same question that you've already put in as an example. If I'm using the exact same phrasing, which I did right here, how are you, is already in the system, it will just pick one of the links or one of the answers that are directly linked to that specific question. But I can ask something that's closer to it, like, so how are you? It has never seen this.
I am wonderful.
But it will still give the right answer. Now, obviously I'm cheating because it's the only answer the system knows, but the concept is the same. It doesn't know this particular input. It has never seen this before, but it will look and compare the novel question, individual words, 2 words at a time, bigrams, 3 words at a time, it's a variety of n-grams to the question it has in the system and the answer it has in the system. And it will rank the possible answers the character can say. Now, that's what the Npc Editor does. Like I said, like Google Information Retrieval, you get a set of answers back. Now you can decide what to do with that set of answers. So they're ranked in terms of relevance. So typically there's a threshold. If none of the answers are relevant enough, you can program it to say, okay, I don't know what you're saying, please rephrase your question. What by default the idea is that there are 3 of those off topics. The first time the system doesn't understand you, we'll ask you to say it again because speech recognition may be wrong. The second time it will ask you to rephrase it because it may know about it, but it may not know the way you have phrased the question. And then the third time it asks you to move on and discuss a topic that it does know about. The other thing it's doing, you can see that right here, is trying to avoid repetition. So even though if a certain answer is the best answer, if there's other answers that are also above the threshold, it will just pick that one And it will just have a short memory of trying to avoid the same sentence. So conceptually, does this make sense to everybody? So when you create a character that's bigger than this, you think about what the character wants to say. You, for each kind of like type of utterance, you have a couple of paraphrases, you add example questions, and then you just basically, try it out and you see what matters. And the interesting thing is that once you start authoring these, you notice how dogmatic we all are with our language. You know, I'm already running out of ways to ask her how she's doing, but there's a gazillion different ways, right? And this is just a very, very simple question. So what you need to do is you need to give the system to other people. Have them sit in front of it, have them try it out, test it, see where it works well, see where you didn't even think about how to phrase a certain question, see where there are gaps in the knowledge. So when you don't know how to phrase a certain question, you get new ways of phrasing a question, you add it to the example questions. When you see gaps in knowledge, you need to extend the repertoire of the agent and add more answers. That requires more testing because you want to see how different people ask about those answers. So it's an iterative process where you review answers and questions and link them together. I can go to Brad now and have him say something like, the toolkit is awesome, and see how he sounds.
The toolkit is awesome.
He doesn't sound that awesome. So as a backup, you can record your own voice, just like the example demo. Again, this microphone is bad, so bear with me quality-wise. But you can hold the button while speaking this line. The toolkit is awesome. You can release it, and in the background, there's a system that analyzes my speech in order to get a lip sync schedule.
I am doing well.
Now, because the microphone is right next to the fans, that's a problem with this laptop. So it's just like a whole bunch of noise. So the lip syncing won't work well, but with a regular microphone, it's not too bad at all. So now we can see what he says. The toolkit is awesome. So you can use pre-recorded speech as a backup. The nonverbal behavior tab then. So I mentioned that the NVBG is analyzing the text on the fly and is using a variety of different rules. All those rules are in XML-based data types. What we do here is expose the more basic ones of them. So the example here, so this is the overall rule. From it, we're looking now at the U animation rule. And whenever Brad is in this particular posture, which means his regular posture, hands at side, and whenever he says any of these words, he can use any of these animations. So let's see if that works. So if Brad says, "How are you?"
How are you?
He uses this gesture with both hands.
How are you? How are you? How are you? How are you?
There we go. Statistical process, non-deterministic. It's awesome for demos. That's the idea, right? So this is basically keyword spotting, but there's a whole bunch of these rules. They're combined with syntactic rules. So if you have a noun phrase, it will maybe do a head nod and all those kind of things. All these rules fire with certain priorities, get scheduled, get prioritized, and you end up with one behavior schedule. Here you can preview what animations there are. So I would have to do Brad at idle 01. I can now see what kind of gestures he has and which ones I like. That means I can add ones, I can remove ones, and I can modify these rules. I can also create a new rule. This rule we will call the awesome rule. And whenever he says the word awesome, I will make him do something fun. Again, you need to apply, so all the rules are being trained in the background. The toolkit is awesome. So as an aside, the toolkit has been around since 2009. This is obviously a later version. but 2009 was the first time we did the toolkit. The toolkit is a collaboration, like I said, between all these different groups at ICT. Nonverbal Behavior Generator, Multisense, Npc Editor, you know, all the different groups work together to create something, and we created the toolkit out of that. The first toolkit version that we created in 2009, we needed a demo, an example. We can't just ship out, you know, our actual training systems to the academic research community. So I created that example with just Brad back then. And it is so much fun to create these characters. Brad made fun of everybody in the institute, of all the other virtual humans. We're all stupid. He was very snarky, which was a lot of fun for me, somewhat less fun for other people. But it shows you, with these kind of mechanisms, what you've seen is, you know, questions, answers, and some nonverbal behavior rules. But now you can go wild, right? Sure, it's research, it's basic research. You got to fight the system a little bit, and you can see certain things go wrong. But it's a lot of fun to put your creative energy into creating these kind of characters. The last one is more of an example. I'll briefly show this. So some customization for characters. This allows you to change the color for characters, which apparently is broken, so that's lovely. See if this here works. Also broken, so I should not have shown you any of this. Okay, this at least still works. Facial expressions, you can just play around with this a little bit. Very suave looking Brad. This we moved to a different tool that I won't show right now. But VH Builder is this tool that allows you to learn these concepts. There's another tool that I won't go into right now, which is called the Character Customizer. It's very similar, but basically it allows you to create individual lines for characters and then record those lines and make movies. And here, that's where we moved the customization stuff. We just haven't removed it here yet. But the idea there is that you can create movies, you can put them on YouTube. And what we used to do is a lot with cognitive science is to run certain studies. So one of the studies a while back was, say you have the same virtual human, same look and feel. You have the same line being spoken, but one is spoken by an American who doesn't have an accent, and another one is spoken by a Chinese American who has a Chinese accent. You can run these movies, show them to people, see how they're being rated, and then see if there's any difference, purely based on the accent of a person. Now, that also shows you the strength of virtual humans. We do a lot of role-playing and training exercises. You know, it's students one-on-one, maybe teachers, maybe actual professional role players, but they're either untrained or they're expensive. They're not always available, they're inconsistent. And virtual humans obviously don't offer the same fidelity as real human beings, but they're a great tool to augment that kind of training. A system that always performs the same way, that's always available, that people can train and study with at home, that you can collect data from automatically, analyze later, that kind of stuff. Okay, any questions about VH Builder? Yes?
Press record, where the files get stored because you want to move them?
They get stored. Let me go over the file structure in general, and then along the way I'll get to your question. So when you install the toolkit, like I said, Run Launcher is the main one here. Come to think of it, you should all be on Confluence. So as you can see, our external toolkit, VH Toolkit, the documentation section is actually just an internal Confluence thing, where you keep a lot of documentation at ICT. I would need to log in for this. Go to the toolkit. You see everything that's accessible outside, but there's also an internal one. So if you're a new member one, you can see a lot of this documentation here, like what I just mentioned, the NetApp thing. You can also see our link for SVN, our source code repository. The toolkit is it's readable by everybody who has an IST account. That means you can pull down the source code of the toolkit. You cannot write to it. So if you're an intern and you're working with somebody, ask us for access so you can commit stuff back, or maybe we need to create your branch, or whatever it is. But basically, everybody can read the source code. Everything has a project in Microsoft Visual Studio, so there's a solution there that you can open and you can build a whole bunch of stuff. Now, directory structure-wise, everything that's built, everything that has a binary is in bin. So those are basically the modules, the runtime components. So that means that Unity, we have a VH Toolkit Unity, that's just an executable right here. If you want to load the Npc Editor, it's a Java jar, you use run here. So that's in bin. Core has the source of all the modules. So, or most modules at least. Npc Editor, all the source is in here. Not in the version that we distribute. That's what I'm looking at right now. But when you pull it out, in data we have certain data, like the cache for the text-to-speech. So here are all the audio files we just used, and other things. And the data of VH Builder is all in here. So in scenarios in VH Builder, I just made a 2 folder. That's where all this stuff is. Now, the tricky part is we can get it to work, but it's all self-contained, and there's a couple of hacks to just make all these tutorials work. So it's not as easy as copy-pasting everything to the other locations, but a lot of it will work. You can see here, you can see roughly what it is. The plist is for the Npc Editor, the templates are for the NVBG, you're probably aware of all of that. So you can definitely use all of that kind of stuff. And then there's some custom scenario information specifically for VH Builder. Other data which is important is the classifier has all the data for the Npc Editor. So that's in data classifier. So as an example, it's in here, data classifier. Our main demo, Brad and Rachel obviously makes Rachel, so that's our plist for that specific thing. Once you are familiar with the VH Builder, you're familiar with the concepts, that then allows you to move on to the Npc Editor, which is the actual tool that is driving a lot of these different characters. So here you can see the example for Brad and Rachel, which is a little bit more complicated than VH Builder, but basically the same, conceptually. I'm not sure why it doesn't let me, there we go. So again, you have on the left-hand side, you have questions, but a whole lot more. On the right-hand side, you have answers. You should still be able to double-click this. But I may need the NVBG for that.
Hi, I'm Rachel, a virtual human.
There you go. So let me briefly, while I'm at it, go a little bit more deeply into the Npc Editor. Hi, I'm Rachel, a virtual human. I'm Rachel. These are answers, and basically there are typically answers for, what is your name? What you can do is you can order it by these little dots here. And you can do the same thing here. There. So I've got them both ordered. So what you see here is who are you to, who are you, what is your name, and all these different variations. Everything that's green right here, I have it selected right now. It shows you these green links to any of these green answers. What you see here is the strength between those links. So it's the same as we saw in VS Builder, where you have questions and answers and you make a link. Here you can change the strength of this link. The link value is here. You can see it's relevant and fluid. Now, when you create your own content, it should always be the strongest possible strength, because you're writing your own content. You want to be able to write, you want to write relevant and fluid content. This is only useful if certain content comes in from data collection out in the wild, you cannot change the answers. Then you can, okay, I want to say something to this kind of question. I'm just going to use this answer. It's not great, but it's the best that I have. That's why this is helpful. Now you can see here that this whole block of green stuff is linked to only this one fully. But who are you to? You know, it's addressed to both of them, so both hi, I'm Rachel and hi, I'm Brad are relevant. Let me see what those examples are. When you say madam, it's only relevant for Rachel. When you say lady, it's also only relevant for Rachel. And apparently we don't have any manly examples. But this is the idea, conceptually, that you can have certain questions that are relevant for a larger set of answers, and then certain more specific questions that are only relevant for a subset of answers. Now, while we're at this point, the way you write these answers, you got to think about it decontextualized, if that makes sense. So a line can say, my name is Brad, but it should not say, hi, my name is Brad. Because the second one, hi, my name is Brad, is only relevant when the user asks a certain, also includes a greeting, like, hey, how are you, what's your name? Hi, my name is Brad. But if it's a very specific question, if you already had the greeting, and you then ask the question, what is your name? Hi, my name is Brad, doesn't make sense. So it's another way of thinking about these kind of questions, that they should be as much as possible standalone and not to be too specific. You often get into that, especially when you have dialogue, because we often repeat words. Like when somebody asks you a question, it's like, oh, that's a very interesting question, Arno. Let me respond to that right now. That's obviously a big example, but repeating questions and having context is very difficult because you want to make your lines work as much as possible in a generic context. Now, you asked earlier the scripting of different lines. So like I mentioned before, an output can be anything, and sometimes an output is just a script. So anything that starts with script here, you can see you have a begin and an end statement, and then we just schedule lines. So you can have Brad and Rachel or your own two characters just banter back and forth as a generic one answer that you shoot out, and the rest of the system will take care of the scheduling and everything. What's important then here is domains. Now, in the toolkit, we use domains to support multiple Unity scenes. So it's not a great example, but basically campus is the Unity scene that we were at. We have a house one as well. So ignore the anybody for now, but basically we have a general one, and campus and house inherit from that. That's important because what I left out and what we do in the background of VS Builder, you need to now do explicitly here. The more data you enter, you need to train the Npc Editor on this new data. So once in a while, you need to go to the classifiers, select your main domain, and you test on training data, and you start training. It changes a whole bunch of these things, including the threshold. This number here, hold on. So we don't see the question here. Let me take a brief detour. Here you see all the possible answers, and they are ranked by its value. The closer to 0, the higher. So you can see here that minus 8.1 is the highest score. However, in our classifier, the threshold is set at minus 5.8. So when you train your classifiers, the important thing that changes here is the threshold, but you can manually change that. So if I change this to minus 9, Now all of a sudden, all these ones are relevant. All of these ones are valid and can be used. So when you add more questions, when you add more answers, you need to train your data and you need to play around with it and look at this threshold value so that you don't get too little responses back. You don't all the time get like, I don't understand, what are you saying, whatever. But you also don't get like 40 different responses back because then it's just almost random, right? So that's the important part about the Npc editor is the classification that you need to do once in a while. While we're at it, so utterances here, settings, just settings for the Npc editor itself. People, you can look at examples here, but it basically shows you for how to set up a character. So we have everything we call user. This is how you set up a character so that it can communicate with the rest of the system. Again, you can just look at this example from Brad and Rachel. Classifiers we went over. Conversation means you can choose what dialogue manager you want. The default one is fine, scriptable. But know that if you want to be more adventurous and dig into it, what that does is it sets a certain script. So all the things I just talked about, whether the different levels of the first off topic is please repeat, then please rephrase, then please move on. All that logic is here. If you are a programmer, especially if you're working on the natural language side, this is the file where you get started. This is where you get the set of results back and you choose what you do with it for set of results. It's a little bit too in-depth to discuss here, but this is where you would get started. And then the chat is where you can debug it. So how old are you? You can see that you get the thing back. So why don't get a score? Because how old are you is exactly in there. So it's just linking all the positive ones and all the negative ones. But now that it's a question that it's never seen before, now it starts to rank and it shows you how it's looking at all these things. So you can see here that I manually changed that value earlier. You may recall it was minus 5.8. If I would have left it at minus 5.8, only the first two would have been valid. So that's great. That's what you want. So again, here you can play and debug around with that. Questions about the Npc editor?
Yeah, question?
Yep.
So back to the scripting part, can you change the timing of the scheduling? Like, yeah, that part?
Yeah, you can. I'll have to look up though. So this is all GroovyScript. So I think you can just put in whatever regular Groovy scripting exists. I don't think we have to document it. I'll have to look at it. And you can ask Anton Lioski as well. Who has seen Gunslinger next door? 2 people, wow. 3 people, oh my God, 5. Anyway, Gunslinger is an amazing system that I happen to have led in the past. What it is it's a Hollywood set, Wild West set, a bar, a saloon. You walk in, there are 3 characters that talk to you. It's a branching story. You have open-ended dialogue. You have choices that you make. That system is also the Npc editor. So there we have a single AI, so to speak, with 3 different heads. And there's a lot of scripting in here that based on, if you are at a certain point, based on your answer, you go down a certain thing. It is supportive of the Npc editor. It is not easy to use, and the way you do that is with those different domains, like the domains that you have here, the general campus house. You can have domains as sort of state and then have state machines. So the TOS one is important there. Not sure we have it here. So these are just some debug one, but in general what you can do is create different domains, which would be a state. And within the domain, if a certain line gets triggered, you can then toss to a different domain or a different state. So that's what we did next door, where there's a very specific script, and part of it is based on timers. So we have a lot of timers in there that says, after 5 minutes, Rio comes in, or something like that. And you can modify those timers if you want to. So that's all possible. It's not necessarily easy. And it's the strength and the weakness, I feel, of the Npc editor. The strength is that you can do whatever you want with it because you can script it. That's also the weakness because there's no support for it. So it has support for that statistical text classification and questions and answers, and that's very easy to do. Everything else you need to script. So if you don't if you're not careful, you quickly can lose track of the mechanics behind it. Any more questions?
Is there a button for re-recording, or do you have to do that separately outside?
You have to do that separately outside, yeah, and part of it is that we kind of hacked it before. But going back here, we have data. Lib is all libraries, obviously. Tools is, tools like VH Builder. And then local tests, this is where a lot of the messages are being saved. So while I'm here, let me quickly do that. So when I said that VH message over ActiveMQ is sending all these messages, that's all being logged right here. So here an example of VR Speak. You want to have Brad say, you can ask us questions about yourself with the Virtual Human Toolkit. All of this is all being done in here. You can see here me trying to ask a question incrementally, partial speech results. I asked, what is your name? And what it got was, don't, and so over time it updates that speech thing. That's all in these logs right here. Going back to your question, I'm actually going to, okay, so I'm going now from the build to the trunk, quit everything here. Because we moved to Unity, a lot of data needs to be encapsulated in Unity, in the Unity project. So that's why it's not strict all in data anymore. A lot of that is now in here. So in core, where the main modules are, in VH Toolkit Unity, this is our project. And let me run this. We're in the transition from 32 to 64 bits. So just so you know, they're both in there, but 64 is the preferred one. So in assets, in sounds is where all these sounds lie for the basic example. So all the Brad, all the Rachel. In the Npc Editor, the answers have a ID. That ID needs to match this file name. What you have here is the actual WAV file, and you have a lip syncing schedule, which is a BML file. Actually, it's a BML text file, yeah. So those two pieces of data you need. So in order for the whole system to work, you go from Npc Editor line, needs to be transcribed correctly, needs to have the right ID, which is the file name, and you need to have both the WAV file and the BML lip syncing file. The way you get the BML lip syncing file is there's all these scripts here at the beginning. So you have a master, you have an Excel spreadsheet with all the lines. There's some scripts that can split it all up, can export it, and then we run it through FaceFX. So all of this is set up here. I won't do it now, but you can here see once you have those text files set up. So all these, I'm not sure if you see it right here, but all the text files are of they're all transcribed. They're not committed here, but what I can do is from the Excel file, CVS file, export that script, split it up in individual text files, and then you can run the FaceFX scheduler. So that is all at the top. You need to have FaceFX, which is included in the VH Toolkit trunk. It's not in the build. You basically run this batch file right here for FaceFX. As a backup, we have Swings 4. It's open source, doesn't work that well. If you do want to use FaceFX, it is, that should be in Tools. It's right here. You need to manually run it the first time, just so you know, because it sets some configuration stuff. So that's where all that stuff will go. Okay, so now we're in Unity. If you want to use the main VH Toolkit Unity scene, you need to use SVN. If you only have to build, we offer a basic Unity project called VH Assets. So if you've downloaded the build, then the VH Assets Unity project is in lib, VH Unity, and then this is the project. That is a Unity project, and it gives you some basic examples of Brad character, both Smart Body and Machin inversion, and you can just play around with it. What we do with VH Toolkit Unity is built on VH Assets. It's a package as well, and we create our own scenes. So in scenes, you have a whole bunch of different scenes. Campus is the main one. I can play it what we did is add a couple of custom tools in the VH menu. One of them is the Machinima Maker. I want to briefly discuss that. So the Machinima Maker is discussed online as well. It is a tool, and it is our in-house developed timeline editor for Unity. It ties into Unity, it ties into SmartBuddy, so it ties together VH and Unity together in a way to create these cutscenes. So from VH, you can select the Machinima Maker, you can drag it to wherever you want. You need to click on it here. So the cutscene intro is this thing right here. You will not hear any sound, but you will see this playing. So you can see here a camera curve, another camera curve. You can see the subtitles. The reason why this is where you're not hearing any sound is because these lines here, "Hi Rachel," are not just play the audio file, but they are a SmartBuddy event, which is an express event. And for Rachel, we want to send this utterance to the NVBG. So that means we actually need to run the NVBG. Need to run the NVBG. Now we should be able to hear something. So this is rewind, this is play.
Hi, I'm Rachel, a virtual human.
Hi, I'm Brad, a virtual human.
A virtual human is a character like us that can perceive real humans and respond both verbally and non-verbally.
So this is a nice tool to play around with as well, because you can choose. So here I'm sending it, this one here, "Hi Rachel," is, it's a SmartBuddy event. We have many others, including a whole bunch of, you can make your own custom Unity event. Specifically, it's an express one, meaning you want to send it to the NVBG, but you can also, if you want to, change the posture, or play an audio thing, or play an animation directly. All of these will be different. So you can, for instance, control click has a new event. I can choose SmartBuddy. I can choose play animation. Now here, these parameters can be filled in. It's smart enough to know to only show the characters, so it can be Brad, and it knows what the animations are. So again, we can do idle 01, and I can be a low beat.
Hi, I'm Rachel, a virtual human.
So
Hi, I'm Brad, a virtual human.
it's subtle, but you can see there that he plays the animation. So you can mix and match depending on your wishes and how you want to stand this up. With the VH Toolkit Unity, you saw at the demo, this is our intro, then it transitions into interactive stuff. So you can make cutscenes that are semi-interactive, you can have them walk around, you can alternate between a cutscene and live conversation. All those things are possible right here. Okay, I think that's a good overview so far. Any questions before we wrap up? Yes. No. So it depends what you're looking at, though. So the Npc Editor, like I said, doesn't understand what you're doing. It's purely looking at variables, so to speak. So you can change those in different languages. If you want to have, I'm Dutch. Dutch is a beautiful language. If you want to have a Dutch system in the Npc Editor, you can. And we have made that actually. We made David's group made Pashto and things like that. They're just items that are being compared in a statistical manner. Now, the NVBG is specifically done with English rules. So you don't get the nonverbal behavior automatically. Because everything you did here, you always get something, right? Because those rules exist. The fact that when I say you, I have a you gesture, doesn't change over time. You can change those rules and have, for Dutch keywords in there or whatnot. You can record your own Dutch lines, so that's not bad either. You can use maybe Dutch text-to-speech system, which is possible. You would somehow need to, if you want speech recognition, you would need to have a Dutch recognizer, otherwise just type in stuff. So per module, it's a little bit different. Other questions?
Do you ever build in a face jump pipeline to customize visual characters?
We have the pieces of it. It's not part of the toolkit, and it's not fully automated, as in it's not end user ready, but it's close to being able to be used.
So similarly, are these pipelines
It's somewhat similar answer. Like, it's fairly easy to get into Unity. There's certain ways of doing it. It's kind of quick and dirty rather than a full automated thing, but yeah, we've done it. Person behind you has done it. Any other questions? Cool. Well, I hope this was useful. Thank you for coming out in such large numbers and staying for the entire thing. Thank you.